Welcome to Fox Soul's Black Report, your space for black news, views, and opinions. Today is Monday, January 24th, 2022. I'm Seth Lemon.
I'm Nielle.
I'm Romeo.
I'm Demi Lobo. And on today's report, Mitch McConnell attempts to clarify comments he made distinguishing black voters from other Americans. Black lawmakers walk out of the Mississippi legislature in protest over a ban on critical race theory. Also, Kanye West argues that celebrities should get a cut of the money paparazzi make from taking photos of him.
Plus, Golden State Warriors superstar Steph Curry and his wife Aisha are hosting a new game show. And ready or not, they're not coming, but they're not hiding. While the Fugees say they're postponing their anniversary tour.
We have a lot to talk about today, soulmates, and you know how we do it, from our perspective, in our voice, and in our truth. You ready? Let's talk about it.
Topping your headlines this Monday, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell is pushing back after offending black voters, saying that he misspoke while at the same time describing the criticism against his words as outrageous. The hashtags I am American and Mitch Please began trending after McConnell implied that African American voters cast ballots at rates similar to Americans during a press conference Wednesday. Now, the implication to many suggested that the Kentucky Republican sees black voters as somehow different or not American, punctuating the push for voting rights as legislation continues across states, pushing to change their laws and make it even tougher for black voters.
You look at the statistics, African American voters are voting in just as high a percentage as Americans.
Now, attempting to clarify on Friday, McConnell said that he's never been accused of this sort of hurtful, offensive thing before, and he offered his record on voting rights as a defense, noting that he attended the 1963 March on Washington and was present when the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was passed. The Congressional Black Caucus also tweeted about this, saying that African Americans are American 365 days a year. Now, McConnell, he's arguing that the GOP blocked voting legislation last week because it wasn't necessary. He accused Democrats of co-opting Congressman John Lewis's name to federalize election law. The bill, however, this was a direct response to the Supreme Court's ruling that weakened those protections in states, particular states that have a history of disenfranchising black voters.
You know, the fact that the Mitch Please, I want to go back to the hashtag, definitely was trending on Twitter this all day for the last couple of days. And it really saddened me to see our black brothers and sisters having to get together and post a photo to try to prove that we're black Americans. That really hurt my heart. But what I really love, too, is that Twitter lets you forget absolutely nothing. And so I thought maybe this was like a slip up at first. But there's a video of him also saying a while back saying that his party does well with white people. So I feel like, you know, it wasn't a slip up. He caters to the white people, and he really does not feel like black Americans are Americans.
Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks, right?
Right. I think this is just typical of how white lawmakers in general look at black people in this country. But I also want to talk today about is in 1972, Shirley Chisholm announced her run for president. And it was an historic moment. And there are things like us as black Americans, we have to remember things like this. She was unbought and unbossed, and that's how we have to continually to be in this country, because we know that there is a disenfranchisement attack on black voters. All right, the January 6th committee continues to interview former Trump administration officials. Now, Chair Benny Thompson says the panel has spoken with former Attorney General Bill Barr. Barr's Department of Justice never found evidence of widespread election fraud following the 2020 election. Now, former President Trump claims there was. The panel has also interviewed Department of Defense officials, and Thompson says the committee is concerned the Trump White House wanted to use the military to seize voting machines. Now, news of the idea came from a draft of an executive order that was never used. It would have authorized the Secretary of Defense to take control of the machines. Now, the information came from a stack of White House documents it received from the National Archives.
The critical race theory battle continues to heat up. Black members of Mississippi's Senate walked out of the chamber on Friday in protest before a vote on a bill described as a ban on critical race theory. Senate Bill 2113 would forbid public schools in the state from forcing students to agree that any sex, race, ethnicity, religion, or national origin is inherently superior or inferior. The bill passed in the Senate by a vote of 32-2 after the black lawmakers walked out. Democratic State Senator David Blount and Hob Bryan, both white, were the only two legislators to vote against the bill. It now heads to the State House.
New York Mayor Eric Adams is calling on Washington lawmakers to pass gun reform. Now, Adams made the plea after a violent week in the Big Apple. An NYPD officer was killed and another is in critical condition after a shootout in Harlem. Adams says he needs Washington to help stop the flow of illegal guns into his city and others facing an epidemic of violence. Last year, New York saw 500 murders, a number the city hadn't seen since the height of the crack era. Adams, a former NYPD captain, has been in office for only 3 weeks. He ran on a law and order platform during the mayoral campaign.
A group of students have ended their hunger strike for voting rights. Now, last week, while on hunger strike, the students participated in a week-long demonstration with dim hopes of voting rights legislation passing in the Senate. Democrats failed to change filibuster rules last week, meaning the party didn't have the votes to pass the voting rights legislation. Democratic Senators Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema voted against the rule change, joining every Republican in the 48-52 vote. On their last day of protests, the demonstrators were arrested with Congressmember Jamal Bowman crowding and obstructing Capitol Police said. The student hunger strike was led by Unpacked. Now, here to discuss what's next for voting rights is two of the student demonstrators. Welcome, Kyla Frank and Adrian Horton.
Thanks so much.
Hi.
Thank
you so much for having us.
Yeah, so glad to have you guys back. I just want to talk to you and first start off, how are you feeling? You guys have held 2 hunger strikes. You've been on Capitol Hill demonstrating. How are you feeling right now? I'll start with you, Kyla.
I'm completely exhausted. This has been a long struggle and battle for meaningful democracy reform in this country. And it is very disappointing to see that 52 senators stood on the wrong side of history and voted against the most meaningful bill of our lifetime. But I am still hopeful because there are young people like me and Adrian who are continuing to fight and are not going to give up.
All right, Adrian, how about you?
I agree with Kyla, completely exhausted. So we left DC on Friday, and just yesterday and the day before on Saturday, I just slept. I haven't been sleeping well, a lot of stress from this, physically, emotionally, spiritually. So, this news of the failed vote on Thursday night is extremely disappointing, but we know that we have no choice but to continue to keep fighting because it's too important.
Well, we're along with our so much. We appreciate the fight that you're out there putting up. So thank you for that. So Adrian, let's talk to you. Talk to us about the demonstrations you held last week. Who did you work with, and do you think it was effective?
Yes. So we were joined by so many community members, faith leaders, executive directors of nonprofits and other political committees. We were shown a lot of solidarity. I think that this tactic was extremely effective. Again, this was not just, we didn't just choose to do this. This was an escalation because other tactics were not working. And so I think based on all of the media attention and the increased awareness about this issue, we really were effective in mobilizing young people, but honestly, just the whole country. So, we did everything what we were supposed to do, but the Senate failed to rise to the moment.
Right. So we know that the demonstrations took place with members of Black Voters Matter, Latasha Brown and Cliff Albright. We know that Tamika Mallory was there, Stephen Green representing the pastors. But Kyla, you had a conversation with the King family. Can you talk to us about that experience?
It was so inspiring, but I saw the pain in their eyes because Martin Luther King Jr. fought so hard for especially Black people to have a voice and a vote in this country. And the fact that they have to continue their father's struggle, it was difficult. But again, it was very empowering to know that they are continuing this struggle because it's needed and it's urgent. And I am truly honored to have been able to speak with them and join them in that struggle.
This question is for Kyla and Adrian. We'll start with you, Kyla. Why did you all decide to go on the hunger strike? Tell our soulmates that.
Because this issue is so urgent, and we have tried for the last year calling, emailing, even meeting with our senators, over 20 Senate offices to talk about passing democracy reform, and none of those tactics have worked. And so we wanted our senators to feel our urgency. We wanted to make a moral plea to them to pass this bill because our democracy is crumbling, and disappointingly, many senators stood on the wrong side of history. Many senators failed young people because they are beholden to dark money and corporate interest.
Yeah, and Adrian, you want to answer that as well, please?
Yes, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, what made you decide to do the hunger strike? What motivated you to do that?
Right, so like Kyla mentioned, we did all of the things that our senators tell us to do, calling, emailing, posting on social media. And so what are we to do if none of that is working? So we knew that it was time to escalate. And as I mentioned last time I was on this show, you can do a couple different types of escalation, but because we have the moral authority as young people, we felt that this required a moral sacrifice as well. So rather than something extremely, disruptive, we really wanted to just show people the lengths that we were willing to go through to display how important this was and how urgent it was.
Well, we really appreciate the both of you joining us today, and we will be checking in with you as we lead up to the midterms. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you.
All right, take care.
All right, a Kansas district attorney is using the state's Stand Your Ground law to justify why he is not pursuing criminal charges in the death of a 17-year-old black boy. Surveillance video from a Wichita juvenile center shows Cedric Lofton struggle with the staff there 2 days before he died. Police say that Lofton died in September after staff members restrained him face down for more than a half hour. The state's Stand Your Ground law, it allows the use of force in cases of self-defense. The district attorney said that the law prevents him from charging the staff members involved, deciding not to because the workers, he claims, were protecting themselves. Kansas state lawmakers say they will reconsider the current law's wording that was passed in 2010 and intended to apply to people protecting personal property, not police officers and correctional facility staff. This video is pretty troubling right here, and it's also very strange to see Stand Your Ground be applied in so many different cases. We've seen how it's been used in Florida, where somebody who is in their car hears music that they deem too loud and decide to start firing at teenagers. Now we're seeing it being used to defend police officers, and regardless of where you stand on the Second Amendment, I think a lot of people agree that you have a right to protect your personal property and your home. But examining the law like this or using it in other applications, it's quite questionable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what's really startling is the fact that some can use Stand Your Ground, but when people of color use it, they end up dead, they end up in jail, or they end up questioning. But when white Americans do it, there's no question. They just feel like, okay, you're in the right place. And finally, just consider this, soulmates. That one video that you saw, there are hundreds and thousands of other people of color that have been subject to that, and there is no tape on it. And so this is an issue that we definitely need to address.
We have to. Go ahead, Jimmy.
I just want to talk really quickly about the prone position because that's very important as well. We didn't get a chance. He was in the prone position for 30 minutes, and so we didn't learn a lot about the prone position until George Floyd passed away. And I think that the prone position is also something that we need to talk more about because it's something that police officers have been using a lot to kill off over 120 deaths. $70 million in settlements have been to prone position deaths since 2010. And so I think that's also something that we should look a little bit deeper into and figure out why is that what we're using to kill off black Americans right now? Yeah. Not even right now, like since 2010, of course. So
lots of questions remain.
Absolutely. So Florida lawmakers passed a bill that would ban the discussion of sexuality or gender identity in school classrooms. Promoters of what is officially known as the Don't Say Gay bill say it will protect a parent's right to talk to their kids about sexuality. But critics like Chasten Buttigieg, husband of Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, they disagree. He wrote on Twitter, the bill will, quote, kill kids. A study says 42% of LGBTQ plus youth seriously considered suicide in the last year. Just again, back to similar what we're talking about critical race theory. Why are we banning something that needs to be talked about? If a child wants to date a person of the same sex, they're going to do that whether you block them from talking about it or not. They're going to see it on Instagram. They're going to see it on TV. Why are we blocking topics that need to be talked about? Also, what I thought was interesting, they want to block the topic if it's age appropriate. Who are you to say if it's age appropriate or not?
Romeo, you're a parent. What do you think?
Well, I think at the end of the day, you have to allow this conversation. This is the world that we live in. And if you try to hide it or push it up under a mat, then it's going to end up backfiring you as a parent and your relationship. Can you imagine a relationship with your kids just being damaged because you don't want to communicate and talk about these things? We have to do that. So what they're doing again in Florida is just out of pocket for me. It really is. All right, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis continues to focus on making changes to the state's election process. Now proposing his own version of a new congressional voting map for the state that effectively strips 2 majority black districts of their power. The Republican governor's version of a map essentially gives his party control over 17 of his 28 congressional seats for the next decade. His office said he offered his proposal because he must ultimately approve any changes passed by the legislature. DeSantis' plan comes months after the state began working on its own and eliminates a heavily Democratic district between Tallahassee and Jacksonville. The Florida Senate has approved a different version that maintains a majority-minority district. That proposal is now headed to the state house. Experts say the governor injecting himself into the debate adds greater uncertainty to the process. The governors just continue to do what he do. Man, Florida, I feel like this governor, what he's doing to that state, is like just making it totally separate from the United States. We understand last week we were telling you about how he wants to pay $6 million to police so they can monitor the voting process. We talked about how he wants to do other things in that state that's totally to the left. I'm sorry, to the right. But at the end of the day, I think like we have to keep fighting and can't give up the fight. We have soulmates in Florida that want to have their right all across the board.
Well, Republicans have a strategy that's definitely working. We know that on Capitol Hill, it's the voting rights legislation. We know that we have over 19 states that are pushing for voter suppression, voter intimidation, and we have the redistricting conversation that is happening across the country. And so we are fighting on every odds because they are moving at a rapid and cohesive pace, and we have to figure out how to combat that because they are really trying to take away votes from people of color.
I just don't understand why he would inject himself in this conversation at the last minute like this. So we'll see. I don't think any of the legislators there in the Florida House took it up or really considered it, but he definitely wanted to make his opinion known. All right, over in Georgia, there's a pastor and a wife accused with locking people with mental and physical disabilities in the basement of their home. Police arrested Curtis Keith Bankston and his wife Sophia earlier this month, charging them with false imprisonment as well as running an unlicensed group home. Griffin, Georgia firefighters, they were called to the house for the report of a person having a seizure, and police say when the crews arrived, they spotted a deadbolt on the lock. On the basement door. It forced firefighters to have to climb through a window to get to that sick person. Prosecutors say the Bankstons controlled the finances and the medication of the residents. The couple's lawyers have denied any wrongdoing, claiming that they were doing God's work of feeding and clothing the needy.
A Kansas City area police department is defending an employee who wore a Confederate flag dress to her senior prom in newly surfaced pictures. A concerned person contacted the Kansas City Star newspaper with the 2013 photo of Belle in a red dress with stars and blue and white stripes displayed in an X formation. Sergeant Samantha Bell has worked at the Lafayette County Sheriff's Jail for 5 years and is reportedly training to become a sworn police officer. Bell's mother said she made the dress for her daughter and claims there's nothing racist about the symbol that celebrates their family's heritage and her deceased grandmother. The Sheriff's Department said it discussed the photograph with Bell, who informed them she was in no way making a racial statement with the dress. So although Black Americans, we feel the way that we feel about the Confederate flag, there are still people in the world that have so much, they feel passionate about the Confederate flag. And so I get it. You know, it seems like Black people, we're getting extra, right? We have our own month. We're getting money to our HBCUs. We're in positions that we usually were not in before. But, you know, and I get it. You want to be rebellious, but there's just no way in any world that this was okay.
I don't understand the argument this consistent argument about the Confederate flag being about people's heritage. Look, if you are a U.S. citizen, you are waving that flag, you are waving a traitor's flag. They really tried to secede from the Union. They did, and they fought against the country that is now the country and the government still in place. So if you're waving that flag, you are waving the flag of clearly the opposition.
But I think it also speaks to they want to go back to the way it was, where white supremacy ruled. We know that. And it also becomes to one of my favorite questions. Is she innocently ignorant or is she a racist? And that's the question at hand.
I'll put it like this. At the end of the day, we wonder why racism is still in our country. Parents are teaching it and giving that information to their kids. They're feeding it to them. The mom works in the police force, right? She works in that area, so that's going to be a problem when it comes to black people. And now you're giving it that information to your daughter and you tell her it's okay. What is she going to do as she passes down through more generations?
Masking it as history and heritage.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.